Hello everyone, it's Francesco Ganora again. I'd like to talk today about a very simple and basic topic in ESB, uh, and that's the topic of configuration properties. This is important because a lot of configuration cannot be hard-coded into the integration code, but they need to be let's say soft-coded so they can be easily changed for different deployments of the application. So this is a very basic topic, so it's covered in online training. To demonstrate a way to flexibly assign the configurations across different environments. I've already built a trivial integration, which you can see. This Mule application still called property demo. And here there are a couple of places where configuration properties are used. First of all, the HTTP endpoint has the port. The port is in the connector configuration. The port is configured, is not hard-coded, but is configured as a configuration property called http.port. That's, as you probably know, we use the ent-like notation to express configuration property. This is typically an environment-dependent configuration, as the HTTP listener will listen to different ports in different environments, say development, test, quality assurance, and production. Then we have, for example, logger. A logger has, again, a login message with the same HTTP port configuration property. Then we have set payload step. And here we have two configuration properties. There's one called title and one called custom message. So I put a couple of them to show that some properties could be environment independent, so they have normally the same value across different ESB environments, and others are environment dependent, so the value will vary from one environment to another. The environment independent configuration properties are still necessary to be defined as such, because many times they cannot be hard-coded, so we need to have the freedom of changing these properties across all environments, but still changing in a configuration file and not changing mule flows. If we look into the src/main/app folder in the application, you can see there. Sorry, I was talking about the src/main/resources folder, which is on the class path of the application. We can see there are two property files: the property-demo.properties contains a single property, and that it would be used, such a property file would be used for application independent properties. So you see that the code of the environment is not there. As opposed to the property-demo-dev.properties file, this one, which has the environment identifier dev in its name, and that contains properties which depend on the environment. So we see the port and we see a custom message. So we have two different property files, the one without the environment in the name and the other with the environment code in the name, for different types of properties. So it's very important in the integration to distinguish environment independent values from environment dependent values. How do we use these values? Well, what we do is that we define in the application a property in the global elements of the application under one of the application Mule configuration files. There's only one in this case. We define a property placeholder element, and here we define, we put a comma separated list of the two property file names. You see the first one, which is the proper environment independent, and the second one is the environment dependent one. You can see you have again a property called the dollar brace env brace. So this env property is the environment property, which is set in different in each environment. This must be defined somewhere else, and normally what we do is that we define in Mule-project.xml, where you can see the env environment property is defined as dev, as development. So this works, but I can already tell you that defining the environment environment code property here is not the best option, because when we deploy to a Mule server, this value will override whatever we set on the command line of the Mule server. So what I advise is to a different course of action that we'll see now. So this works anyway, so I can run it. I deploy it. You can see there is a listener listening for request on port 9090. And that was configured here. HTTP.port is 9090 for development environment. So in HTTP clients such as Postman, I can send a request, and this I get the response like this. So this property demo was value from the environment independent property called title, whereas welcome to development environment is the environment dependent custom message. This is the environment dependent property called custom message. So this works, but when we want to deploy this to a different environment, we need a different property file for the environment dependent properties. So for example, we would need property minus demo minus test dot properties. Here I could have such a file, but when it comes to the environments such as quality assurance and production, the developer will not have a file containing the QA or production property values, because that will not be a developer will not be trusted by the operation team with those values, which could contain also confidential values such as passwords. So these values, this property file must be externalized, cannot be within the Mule application. To externalize this value, we will have an external directory where in each environment we will place these values, these files. On my local Mac, I have created a directory called opt/opt/Mule mule app config, and this directory contains the property file for test, QA, and production. So the one for test will define port 1991 and custom message welcome to the test environment. The one for QA will define port 1992 and message welcome to the quality assurance environment. And finally, the production one will define port 1993 and custom message will be welcome to the production environment. So when we deploy this application to a Mule server, we want the application to fetch the properties from the correct property file for the environment. So the first step in our application would be to extend this property placeholder to include an externalized property file. So we can add to the comma-separated list further property file. They will not be defined simply like this, because this will without any prefix. So without any prefix, it means searching the application's last path. We need to search in the file system. So we would put file colon, and then we're gonna use a property to define the location on the file system, a standard location for the application configuration properties. This standard location could be named, could be a property named app.config.dir, so application configuration directory. Within this directory, we look for the same type of pattern for the property file. So again, property demo $env property. So the configuration file, which is specified last, overrides any values for matching properties that are contained in a configuration file that's specified before. So if I do this, I will see this, of course, in my configuration XML here. Now I need to define this property app.config.dir. Instead of defining that here, I would define in a local Anypoint Studio development environment, I define this both environment property and this new property into the run configurations. So in the run configuration for this application, I define env. In env in Endpoint Studio would be always development dev, and I also define app.config.dir. The value in this case will be opt.mule-app-config. This is a directory that exists I created on my Mac, but it doesn't need, as we will see, it doesn't need to exist, because we can set an attribute that specified if the resource is not found, it's in the configuration resource is not found, is ignored. So we have these two definitions. We apply it We don't have anything here anymore. We try to run this. And this fails. Let's see why it fails. It fails because it searched the configuration placeholder instructed to search for a property file which was contained in the application configuration directory, that is /opt/mule-app-config, plus the dev property file where dev was resolved from the env property. This doesn't exist. So to be able, of course the application does not deploy in any point studio for running. That, despite the fact that we do have a development configuration file in the class path, but this error prevents this application from deploying correctly. So what we need to do is to go into the configuration XML and add an attribute here saying I can use control space, so it suggests the available attribute from the XML schema. Attribute ignore resource not found, and we set it to true. This attribute is not available from the UI of the placeholder, the configuration placeholder, and needs to be set in the configuration XML. In this case, that means that even if the file we see here below is not found, still it's not a problem, because we have, for a development environment, we have the values we need in the class path, and the file specified here is ignored if not found. Let's try again. So now it's deployed, it listens on port 9090, and it still works. So let's suppose we now want to deploy this to a Mule server. I have here installed Mule Server 3.8.0 Community Edition. I don't have an Enterprise Edition Mule server on my laptop, so this is installed under this directory, Mule Standalone 3.8.0. So here we have no apps deployed. I don't know if this server is started or not. No, it's not started at the moment. I've stopped it. So let's first of all, when we install a new server, it's a good idea to modify the configurator wrapper.conf configuration file of the server to define the environment. So I've done this. If we go into the down, and this is a wrapper.conf, we can see I appended under wrapper.java.additional property the next additional property number, which is 15, and 14 was here. I define environment env equals test. So this installation by default is when the Mule starts, this Mule server instance starts, it will have in its environment as a system property env equals test. So this is default behavior. Of course, I can override this behavior by defining the property on the command line. The problem with having, that I noticed with having the env defined here, in the mule-proper.xml is that values seem to override whatever I set at server level. So that is not what we want. So now I deploy, I start the Mule server and I do a hot deploy directly from Endpoint Studio. To start the server, I want to define where the application configuration files are. So I define, I run the server like this, /mule start, and then I define this kind of property, which is the notation is necessary -m -d, because otherwise if I just do -d, this is applied to the tunnel key wrapper around the new runtime. So we need -m -d. So I define app.config.dir equal the path to my application configuration directory, the one that contains property files like this for each application. So you see the name of the application property -demo and then minus environment.properties. This is just an example naming convention. I start the application like this, and this has started as a test environment because, as I showed you before, in the wrapper.conf file, I had defined env equal test. So what we expect is that we will have this configuration files picked up. So the listener will be on port 1991, and we will have the test environment message. I deploy, of course, I deploy in the simplest possible way directly from Endpoint Studio. Otherwise, I would need to deploy to Runtime Manager or via the Maven plugin or the management console. But here I just simply do an export. I export with as a Mule deployable archive, and I export in the apps directory under the name property demo. So after I exported, I go to the apps directory, and I can see the zip file exported, property demo.zip, has been exploded, and after a successful deployment, the Mule server creates an anchor file. To have confirmation, further confirmation, I can open the log file for this application, property demo.log, and what I can see in the log is that the listener is on port 1991, which is the test port. To have a confirmation of this, that this works, I send a request to port 1991, and here we go. We get a response, this time not from the embedded Mule instance, the one embedded into Endpoint Studio, but from my Mule server. And this works as a test environment, so it takes the values from the test property files. If I want to emulate another environment, what I can do is to stop the server. If let's say I stop the server, Okay, that stopped, and I pass this other command line, so mule start, and then I define environment equals prod, so environment will be production, with again the same directory for configuration, application configuration file. In this directory, we saw it before, the prod configuration was specified that the HTTP listener should be in port 1993, and then we have a custom message, welcome to the production environment. So let's say, let's start the Mule server like this. I don't need to the application is still deployed, so it will restart the application when the Mule server restarts. Let's see. In the logs. In the logs, as I expected, the listener is on the production port, so port 9093. And if I send my request to port 1993, I get, well, as I expected, the production message. So you can see I could externalize the configuration on the file system, and the developer will only have the dev property within the application. So in any point studio, the developer only has this property file, and whereas in the other environments we have the dependency of placing the correct property file with correct values for the respective environment. So this gives quite flexibility because it's possible then to replace values and also even to move the configuration file, to another directory, because all we have to do is to change the property app.config.dir, and there we point to a different location in the file system. Of course, we need to standardize this kind of naming. So this shows how we can operate in different environments with configuration file. This is a really simple approach. A more complex approach to externalize configuration would be to use an external configuration database. An example is a tool called Zoo from Conflex. You can see it on GitHub. It runs within a Tomcat servlet container, and then it can be integrated with Mule. There is a nice series of 2 articles on the MuleSoft blog about integrating this tool. And this will offer a web UI to define your properties in different environments. A further topic is a secure configuration of values. There needs to be secured and encrypted. This is also possible, but with our simple approach, we just rely in each environment to the server security. So if we have in the production environment, only in the production environment, we'll have this file with production properties, and server security of the production environment will mean that only system administrators who have the production password, the production server password, will be able to see and access this configuration file, which will not exist in the non-production servers. So I hope this helps, and we'll see you next time for the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.